decision-making tools. Ethics are some certain universal decision-making tools which may be used by a person of any religious group. Normally, ethics is associated with religion. But the scope of ethics is not restricted to the religious people only. Even the atheists find some useful principles from the guidelines of ethics. And religion has different scope. Religion talks about, normally all religions, talks about cosmology, our social behavior, and our proper treatment of other people. Ethics are not always guided by some logic or argument or reasoning, whereas religion is based on scriptural evidences, verbal testimony, traditions, rituals, so on and so forth. My dear friends, as you know, our Indian philosophy is a very old system. All branches of Indian philosophy are very, very old ones. And it is often said, it is, as you know, that there are certain guiding principles common to all philosophical systems. We talk about Mahatma Gandhi, and Mahatma Gandhi was guided by 5 principles. Ahimsa, Satyam, Asteya, Brahma, Satyam, Asamya. These 5 principles. And we know that, hello? Yes, Ahimsa, that is non-violence, Satya, truthfulness, Asteya, keeping, abstaining from stealing or property, Brahmacharya, that is a moral ethical life, and celibacy or moral ethical life. That is keeping money unnecessary. These are common values. These are common values, and these values are eternal. It remains unchanged. At the same time, some other ethical principles like honesty, integrity, promise keeping, trustworthiness, loyalty, fairness, concern for others, respect for others. These are also eternal or permanent ethical norms. Now you see, as you know, that there are some the distinguished speakers will dwell upon all of these things, I am sure, that there are certain branches or divisions of ethics. One, as you know, one is personal or individual ethics. It is which speaks of our individual behavior. The category of philosophy suggesting some guidelines on our personal or individual behavior. To its opposite is social ethics. We are human beings, social beings, and we have some social responsibilities. We have duties. Have civic responsibilities, and these are the areas of social ethics. Sometimes some religious ethics are also there. And irrespective of any religion, all the religions over the world, they have certain common qualities or common principles, and these common principles are always speak of ethics. These are based on ethics. And my dear friends, apart from that, we talk about organizational ethics also, whether in a university or a college or a government or a private organization. What should be the behavior, what should be the duties and responsibilities there should be certain principles, and these principles are also called ethics. And the students of philosophy know that there are three main branches of ethics. One is called meta ethics, which is a analytical in nature and which explores the scope of moral values. And at the same time, it judges what morality actually itself is. This second type is called normative ethics. It is a branch of moral philosophy, and its focus is on highlighting what is morally right or wrong. And the third one is the applied ethics. And today our main focus is on this applied ethics, practical practical application of the moral principles or guidelines, whether individual or social. It talks. It has a wider scope. It covers the health issues. It covers the technology, our technologies, our legal activities, the, and other branches. My dear friends, as you know, that these values or ethical guidelines are subject to changes. I'm talking about this organizational or social values. For as you know, we are a social being, and it is expected that we should care for others. We should share with others. These are our common expected of a citizen of a civil society. But for that, one must dare to do this. One must dare to be caring. One must dare to be caring. And this capacity of daring, it is infused by ethical standard, ethical suggestions. Some ethical principles are subject to change from time to time. Uh, we know that nowadays we talk about much about our environment, the sustainability of our world. Much is debated, much suggested. Uh, so during since industrial revolution in the West, there was a uh, hurry in all the nations to go for rapid industrialization, as we have experienced. And this resulted in severe damage to our environment. But people, at the helm of affairs, they were putting a defer to all these things. Now the consequences are being visible. Now we are now we are giving some guidelines. Now all the nations are giving some guidelines which this should be. This should be followed. Otherwise, Mother Earth will face such calamities that the existence of humans will be at stake. So earlier, cutting a tree, or I mean, cutting the edges of the mountains to still till a few decades ago was not a serious business, serious job. But people now are conscious, and this is being done. This change we have noticed due to the change of our ethical norm, ethical standard. Earlier, at the same time, as a student of Sanskrit, I would like to tell you that it is sometimes criticized that India is a peculiar country wherein the rivers are also worshipped, trees are also worshipped, stones are also worshipped.
vaccine which can trigger the immune system within the human body, thereby coronavirus or any other virus can be fought with. Now, in the light of this, what is to be done for the world community? As one family of the world, what should we do? Ethically, what is binding on us? The only way is to check it and to be guided by the criteria of restriction and to follow the restrictions and the guideline provided and prescribed by the expert is also ethical. To follow that is ethical, and not to follow is unethical. Periodic lockdowns in the country and around the world, and even in India, by the government of India, is in a way a wise decision. But this has created for the consumers and producers of commodities, the economic activities are to a great extent restricted. People in general are disappointed and they are depressed. They undergo tremendous kind of depression, and as a result, the corollaries of the coronavirus, a lot of people are also resorting to suicide. And then those who are suffering from other diseases due to the mental pressure and anxiety and dismay, people are also dying apart from the coronavirus. Like the schools, colleges, and universities are closed. Now, what is to be done even for the educational institution? No answer. We have to wait and see how far the evolving situation of the coronavirus will move, in which direction and the trajectory. We have to wait and see. But to do that also, certain ethical principles are involved. But ethics, well, I will not go into the intricacies and subtleties of the different theories of ethics. Only broad ethical principles I will be dwelling at the moment. It is a fact that there are germs which are not far-fetched. And in this connection, the rapid and indiscriminate industrialization has also caused immense problems, and we have contaminated and polluted our air, water, land, etc. Then with this pollution, somebody may say, what is the connection with coronavirus? Well, there are a lot of things even eminent scientists are not aware of. They are in the dark. And certain bacteria or certain viruses can even float in the polluted particulate of the dust. And once they are floating in the air, by inhaling them, we may come across even new diseases. So that is very much a very important hypothesis and a possibility and a highly probable one. Like, for example, let us say Delhi is highly polluted. Industrial cities have created tremendous problem in many countries of the world, and yes, but a lot of particles, but with that, the or the sector can purify that. Though this is physical cleanliness is also part of the principle all, ethics in general is toward ultimate goodness, the truth and the beauty. And in that overall apex conception, physical cleanliness is very much a part. But today we realize that the travesty of fact is that to go to Jamuna or to Ganga, which are considered as sacred by the Hindu, free even diseases because of the high level of pollution. We see rubbish in Yamuna and Ganga. What bodies are highly polluted, so also atmosphere. I wish to humbly say that scientific understanding is very, very important, and also highly theoretical cognitive understanding are also equally important. Because this clarity and understanding, the superstitious belief can take a grip on the human mind. And I don't mind if I cite an example recently in Bengal. The BP chief said that the coronavirus, one has to drink the cow. And in BHU, Bharat Sindhu University, a professor in a particular department, he started smearing his body with the cow dung to show that it has some good effect. I may say, I don't mind, all these are nothing but pure superstitious belief. So one has to clean our mind. This is not point of a proper scientific understanding. So all these and the so-called ethic will not be taken. The offspring of technology has created also havoc. It is very important in this connection to mention some of the great saints and the sages realize human soul, I would say. According to them, we should consume that much is necessary to keep our mind and body in a healthy way. Not just consuming in a very luxurious way, thereby we destroy our body and our mind. But at present, we are guided by the principle of consume more, produce more, so that profit is more. So it is principle which is guiding the international business and the international commercial enterprise. And if we are strictly to follow ethics, of course, this has to be abundant. Economics and science have been doing this. Both science and economics are collaborating to promote this principle of produce more, consume more, so that profit is also more, and the end result or the logical implication of this is we are exhausting the earth resources, thereby we are doing so many serious environmental problems, even cutting down the habitats of not only the large animals, but also we're invading the habitats of the microorganisms like the bacteria, the fungi, and other unseen if we produce more and consume, we are also going to create inevitable problem for us. People from villages go to cities for settlement and for employment, and the result is heavy congestion. So it is ethical, is such this ethical, what decision the government has to take in regard. There are, if these things are not controlled, they are not far off that humankind perish. It is needless to say that, as I said earlier, land, air, water, etc. are gradually contaminated. Days are not far off. More dangerous diseases like COVID-19 will appear. This is my prediction. You can argue with me, but this is my. I'm not a scientist, as I said, but this is my honest thought. Ancient scriptures or shastras, where certain wisdoms are embedded, and saints and seers and great human exemplar, there we will find some solution to the present problem. Produce less, consume less, so that no pollution is also one kind of ethical paradigm. To conclude, I may say that there is no need to depress. Scientists and physicians who are specialized in making vaccine, they will find out medicine one day. The vaccine will be found one day. It is part of time for the disease. The philosophy of consumerism should be given goodbye for all time to come. If consumerism is allowed to grow, more dangerous than COVID-19 will appear. Go back to Gautama Buddha, Confucius, Socrates, since we have forgotten their wisdom, their sayings, and their life. Our tragedy is that we have respect for them, but we have not implemented their ideas. And India is known in the world because of Gautama Buddha. The fact that many countries which are practicing Buddhism is a clear testimony to this. And since ethics deals with human conduct, good human conduct, this human conduct and good character and virtuous human being is supposed to uplift a good human society, thereby a good world, not only for the other, even for the plant in a harmonious way. It attempts to inculcate the purity of thought, not thinking thought, but our words, our action, our deeds, or purity of even emotion, even including physical cleanliness. The vices like rashness, madness, and should be avoided right from childhood. Treatment should be provided to the mental sickness, and inculcation of values from the home should be started. And the inclination to do good and to imitate the saying and the moral perfected individual should be encouraged for all of us, and our exemplar for us to emulate, imitate from childhood. such learning of virtues is a lifelong process. So ethics is not an easy thing. It is very difficult to have clear thinking and evolving a very clear ethical principle. It's very difficult, but more difficult than to live by them in our daily life. It's extremely difficult, and to do that right from the home, from the school, from the college, from the university to our workplace, till to the grave or to the fire, we have to practice. Without practice, with the rapid development of science and technology, which are not guided by ethical consideration, as we are creating more and more destructive technology, the humankind's destiny will be fixed. Only a matter of time can tell. Therefore, teaching, moral teaching is external. Mere external teaching, many people can do, particularly the professional moral philosophers can do. But what is more difficult is difficult to inculcate the value and the virtue, which is internal. And internal is by example and by imitating and imbibing is the crucial matter. So, around the world, when we look at the different even TVs, national and international TV, we find a lot of immorality and ethical consideration, lot of superstitious belief, trying to create illusion and delusion for the masses. And not only the masses, even the so-called academic and the so-called big officers, they also fall prey to such propaganda and misinformation. Therefore, my fellow participants, my earnest request to all of us is, we all have to practice, we all have to think, we all have to examine and live in our daily life. Whatever we can, in a small way, we have to practice them. Although this is extremely difficult, but in my considered opinion, this is the only way to solve the present human predicament, particularly when we're facing the COVID-19. I thank you once again, all of your hearing and your comments, your valuable criticism, I do welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor J.B. Mauser, Philosophy from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Before that, I request Dr. Papuri Burwa to introduce Dr. Bhaskar Jitnew. Over to you, Dr. Papuri Burwa. Dr. Papuri Burwa, are you hearing? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, carry on.
Yes. Good everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay,
You can carry
you. Thank you. Dr. Bhaskar Jitnew is assistant professor in the Center of Philosophy at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He holds master degrees from the Netherlands, the Linköping University, Sweden, and Gauhati University. He completed his doctoral research work from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. He has been a UGC Inter-University Associate at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Simla, for the year 2011 and 12. Recently, he has also been a visiting resident scholar in the Center for Human Values at the Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata. Apart from UGC-JRF and Institute Fellowship by IIT Kanpur, he has been awarded with two prestigious international fellowships. First, the Endeavour Research Fellowship by the Government of Australia for pursuing postdoctoral research in the School of at the Australian National University and Charles Sturt University, Australia, and the second, Erasmus Mundus Fellowship by the European Union for Research. His primary research interest is in ethics, moral and political philosophy, philosophy of religion, and social ontology. He is present a member of the committee of Sitaram Bharatiya Institute of Science and Research, New Delhi. He has coordinated the discipline of philosophy of religion for the UGC E-Pathshala program. He is editorial member of the Journal of Human Values and Gong University Journal of Philosophy. Mayur has published research works in many national and international journals in the area of ethics and ontology. He also writes book reviews for Journal of Human Values, Dialogue, Canadian Philosophical Review, Ethical Theory and Moral Practice, and British Journal of Educational Studies. He regularly reviews for Journal of Applied Philosophy, Journal of Human Values, JICPR, Dialogue, and other national journals. He has written many books published from Routledge, South Asia Press, etc. And now, may I request Dr. Bhaskarjit Nev, sir, to deliver his lecture. Sir, please, over to you, sir. Dr. Bhaskarjit Nev, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me? I think I am audible.
Sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that generous introduction. And I think I especially thank Tapan and Dr. Sharma for inviting me to this, special session to present my thoughts before you. I'm slightly cut off from the academic community of Assam, so I do not often get such invitations. I do not know many people, and people do not know me often. So the fault actually lies in me rather than elsewhere. So it's actually my second philosophy lecture in Assam, and the first one was at Dibrugarh University last year. So I'm happy, I'm genuinely happy and excited about the fact that the Department of Philosophy has chosen a topic like this to deliberate upon at this crisis situation. So it's indeed a very, very tough time for the entire human civilization. Nobody had thought about it. Nobody thought that there would be a day like this. And we have been hearing about this, the end of the world, apocalyptic stories, and from our childhood days. The first one, I think I remember hearing that in 2000, and then the next one was in 2010, and then 2012. But nothing had happened. No Nostradamus like figures to talk about pandemics like this, but then there are scientists. There are scientists like Joshua Lederberg who sort of warned us long back. He warned us that the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is virus, and people sort of just forgot about it. They never paid attention to this warning, and this is the consequence now we are facing. Anyway, so doing philosophy time is always challenging. It actually reminds me of the philosopher called Ludwig von Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein is quite exceptional. He did exceptionally well in crisis situation. He used to take regular notes for his would-be magnum opus Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus while hiding inside a bunker as a soldier during the First World War in 1918. So he was definitely in a very different league altogether. Cannot be Wittgenstein. But this does not mean we should stop thinking about philosophy in crisis situations like this. In fact, this difficult time actually wants us and demands from us to do more philosophy more rigorously than ever before. And we know the reasons behind it. We know why we have this non-metaphysical demand to do philosophy more perspicuously than ever. I'm glad that the Department of Philosophy has organized this sort of and giving us this opportunity to deliberate upon COVID-19. Lots of talks are happening, and everywhere, people are talking about the ethical implications of COVID-19 and pressing moral concerns of our time. But what exactly are we talking about when we talk about ethics of COVID-19? That's the concern that I have in this lecture. So when Toppen suggested that we should have a sort of a lecture series on this, he told me that the title should be Ethics During COVID-19. I found it very insightful, very sort of exciting. But then one must know the logic behind it. Why have we chosen a topic like this? And what are the implications? What do you actually mean when you talk about ethics, ethical implications of COVID-19 situations? So broadly speaking, ethics during COVID, broadly speaking, it may refer to two things at two different levels. Number one, individual level and the collective level. At an individual level, we refer to our responsibility to protect ourselves and others, our cooperation with the states and its institutions, our duties toward the poor and the disadvantaged, our general concern for the eradication of the problem as such, and so on. While at the collective level, we may refer to duties of the state machineries, the care and concern for the poor, the commitment to provide solutions to the problem, and their perseverance to enhance quality of life during this calamity. So the issues are more or less same, both at the level of individual as well as the level of collective concerns are almost same. In this celebration, I'm going to actually, that's why, be concerned about both the levels. Like any other, crisis situation, as I have said, COVID-19 has also raised variety of moral or ethical questions. I'm going to be using these two words, moral and social and ethical, interchangeably. Speak here about that. So the variety of ethical questions are being put before us. Issues from related to our existence and status on this planet, to our duties and obligations, such as justice and so on. From questions such as equality, equity, and poor, the questions of our forward-looking, to put it, how much a government money for the treatment of the elderly people, how much liberty should be given to me for my individual movement and my business. Executing these decisions, they have to take into account these arguments, when an ethicist talks about these concerns, when an ethicist talks about the justifications behind these actions and omissions by these states, their viewpoints have to be taken into account. But whether or not that has happened in India and also in outside is something that needs to be sort of discussed about more openly, right? So so these are questions that sort of confront us on a regular, we confront these questions on a regular basis. We often ask, I know my individual freedom, I know my individual liberty has been curtailed. The state has warned me not to do certain things, but I have this I have this duty, I have this I have this freedom to ask for the legitimacy of these sort of commands or demands made by the state. So there's no single answer to this. This is something we must be clear about. There's no single answer, and we must not hold the state responsible for not being able to adequately answer these questions. Of course, there's no single answer. There's no uniformity. Every society has its own modality. Every society has its own certifications for doing these, for going for lockdown policy, for going for different mechanisms, different kinds of restrictions. Every society has its own ways of doing things, right? This does not mean that there's no ethical justification. There should not be any ethical justification behind this. In fact, some of the best answers, these questions can come only from perspectives that are driven by justifications. So this lecture, my main aim is to highlight systematic ways of analysis. So I'm not going to talk about the perspectives that philosophers are concerned about as a whole, but I want to sort of narrow down my focus to a particular ethical theory which seems to be doing well in these situations. It's a theory that you all know, at least those who are from philosophy backgrounds, they are pretty familiar with this theory. And also the social scientists, I suppose, they are quite well aware of the origin of this theory. It's a pretty old theory. And the theory is called utilitarian consequentialism. Utilitarianism has been the tool for providing solutions to COVID-19 situations. So a lot of people are talking about the efficacy of utilitarianism over other competing moral theories, such as social contract theory, theology, virtue ethics, situationism, so on and so forth. So a lot of people in the West are sort of gradually putting their focus more on utilitarianism, because utilitarianism has been designed in such a way that it can reflect upon situations like this. When we have crisis situations like COVID-19, how are we supposed to tackle our ethical concerns? And utilitarianism can give us a very, very effective solution. So I'm going to deliberate upon this, how utilitarianism can be very, very handy in, coming up with a proper justifications about our decisions, about the decisions that have been made by the state machineries, about the decisions that have been made by the local administrative authorities, and also about the moral justifications that our neighbors, our neighbors, our families, are concerned about. what kind of ethical justifications can we have when we talk about our individual liberty, freedom, at the same time our health, because health is a value, and this is something that is pretty much clear to every educated person, that health is a value. Health is one of the most significant phenomenon of meaningful human living. Health comes first. We cannot sort of ignore the issue of health at any price. So when we prioritize the question of health, then how are we supposed to tackle those questions? That is the major problem, and be adequately answered, and that's what concerns me in this lecture. Okay, so here is one small suggestion, especially for our philosophy students. I know there are lots of philosophy students who are very sort of attentively listening to our lecture. So I'm sort of, this is a small suggestion. You know, when you talk about, must be in your syllabus, utilitarianism is one of the most dominant theories in your ethics textbook. So when you talk about utilitarianism, there's a very genuine, very general definitions that is often given, and in fact was also told to us when we were doing philosophy in our colleges, when we were doing philosophy in universities. This is this most sort of popular definition given to us, that utilitarianism is a theory about the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. You know, this is the most common sort of definition. But I must emphasize on this definition. I must clarify that this definition is misleading. It is a wrong definition because it contains two maximums, namely the greatest happiness and greatest number. So it's impossible. It has been shown by logicians, it has been shown by many analytic philosophers quite effectively that a theory cannot possibly have a double maximum. So you can talk about greatest while talking about greatest number. So that is simply impossible, theoretically speaking and logically speaking and mathematically speaking. And this has been shown, proven by mathematicians quite clear. So this must be made clear to everybody that utilitarianism is not something that essentially suggests the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. But that's the clarification I thought I should make right here in the beginning. Anyway, now coming to the main point on utilitarianism, it's quite a popular theory, as I have said. It's quite a popular theory to not just philosophers, to social scientists as well. So in Victorian, Britain, it was actually a radical creed. Utilitarian philosophers are known for their passionate liberalism. They were passionate liberal reformers. It was quite a powerful political theory in 19th century Britain, and the entire very section of populations were completely disenfranchised and allowed to suffer from different institutions in the nation. So this theory actually plays a huge role in anti-slavery movement, women's liberations, and animal rights movements. Yet, this is very unfortunate. As a philosophy student, we must be very clear about that. This is a very, very unfortunate thing that in most social scientific explanations, utilitarianism is now used in a very pejorative sense, as if utilitarianism is a bad thing, that utilitarianism suggests things which are not ethical in nature, although it is an ethical theory, but certain very calculative, very sort of instrumentalist ways of talking about things when we talk about utilitarianism. So this has been the image that has been given to us. I know for what reasons, but this is quite common. And in social scientific engagement, we often hear about that. Don't do it. Don't be so utilitarian. Don't be so utilitarian in your agenda. So that has a very negative meaning, and we must ask those people to clarify what's there in their mind when they say that utilitarianism is essentially a very, very bad thing, as it were. This is, in my understanding, this happens mainly because of our inadequate understanding of this theory. We have a very hackneyed, very old-fashioned ways of talking about utilitarianism. This must be corrected. Utilitarianism is now a very, very sophisticated model. If you are a student in economics, you would know its value. You would know its significance. If you are at the policy making level, you would know why utilitarianism can be very, very effective in certain crisis situations like COVID-19. So utilitarianism is not a bad thing. That must be made clear right in the beginning. And we must ask questions those who raise doubts about utilitarianism. And here I'm going to tell you why utilitarianism can be very, very effective in a situation like this. Okay. So as a theory of morality, as I said, I'm not going to give you the history of utilitarianism. That you are going to get anyway by searching on Google. You would get a decent historical sort of background in Wikipedia and other places. So I'm not going to tell you who said what in the history of utilitarianism. I'm going to draw your attention especially to the basic insights of the theory, the main contours of the theory. I'm going to put focus on that. And I'll tell you why that has to be kept in mind and why policymakers find this theory so very helpful. So it's, as a moral theory, as an ethical theory, it holds that maximizing what is good for everyone is all there is to morality. So when we talk about morality, we must talk about maximization of utility. So what is good and what is bad is to be defined by the outcome of our actions. Whatever decision that we take, that decision must be able to give us the best outcome. And utilitarianism judges an action or an omission on the basis of that outcome. If the outcome is good, if the outcome is going to give you the best benefit, then that action must be recognized as good. Okay, so the moral decisions can be arrived at by supplying a single measure of rightness, namely maximization of utility. So it typically accepts that instances of goodness as well as badness be appropriately arranged and aggregated in a quantitative fashion. So we can quantify goodness or badness. Whatever issue is at hand, that issue can be, the concerns of that issue can be quantified and can be arranged in a systematic way. So here I'm giving you an example. Suppose in a COVID-19 situation, I'm giving you an example. Suppose you are a 70-year-old doctor. You have moderate chronic airways disease, suppose. You get COVID while treating your patients. You eventually sort of develop some respiratory failure. Now there's another person who is a 50-year-old businessman who contracted COVID-19 while traveling for business purpose, and he also develops respiratory failure. Now, the triage question that one must ask is, there's only one ventilator in that hospital. Now, these two are the patients before you, and you have to make a decision who should get the ventilator. Only one person can be put in that ventilator, and you have only one ventilator in that hospital. Now, who should get it? Should it go to the doctor who is 70 years old, who has less life expectancy now, maybe just 10 years? Or it should go to a younger, relatively younger person who is 50 years old, who is a business person, whether it should go to him, right? So that's the ethical question that must be answered. Now, how are you going to find an answer to this is the major concern for any person dealing with COVID situations, right? Suppose, another example I'm giving, suppose a government organized farm, suppose a farm comes up with a modeling that suggests that a pandemic is going to kill, suppose, 1 million people, and in the absence of appropriate measures such as lockdown, if there's sort of there's no lockdown, there's going to be a death of 1 million people. So you can always come up with a model. There are a lot of research going on this front. There you can come up with certain models and suggest that these many people are going to die by the end of this year if we do not take measures such as lockdown, right? Suppose you have a model like this. Now, if this model shows that, well, if there is lockdown, then there's going to be less number of deaths. Suppose you can cut down the death by 100 people, 100,000 people. So 900,000 people are going to be dead by the end of this year, even if you have lockdowns. But you will be able to save 1 lakh people. You will be able to save 100,000 people, right? Now, the question that arises here is that but when you talk about lockdown, it comes at certain cost, right? For instance, the economic activities are going to be slowed down. The mental illness of elderly people or young children is going to be on rise. Schools and colleges will be affected. Production is going to be down. Lack of basic treatment for other illnesses will be hampered, so on and so forth. So now, for an ethicist, the biggest question is that how should we make a balance between deaths from COVID-19 and reduction of well-being in general from lockdown effects? How are you going to balance it? If you are sitting in a government policy making decision panel, you'll have to make this balancing act. You'll have to see what kind of sort of effects are you going to have if you go for this lockdown, if you go for a lockdown for a period of 15 days, if you extend it by 1 more week, how much sort of harm you're going to cause to a society, right? In terms of all these things that I have said. So they have to go with certain understanding. You cannot just willy-nilly, one fine morning and declare that from tomorrow there's going to be a lockdown. Well, that lockdown might kill more people than what COVID can kill, right? That's what we have seen in Assam. Hundreds of people are dying in the flood-affected areas. Right, in COVID, I don't know how many people till now, but flood is something which is such a tragedy for the people of Assam, but nobody is talking about it. Everybody's concern is COVID. Of course, COVID has to be taken care of, but one must also be be open to the other crisis, that probably that crisis is going to kill more people. That crisis is going to harm more people than COVID. So these things have to be kept in mind. A good government policy always pays attention to this. And that is why we have seen in certain Scandinavian countries such as Sweden, countries such as Norway, they have a very different model. They're not going for centralized lockdown. One fine morning, somebody will just come and say that from tomorrow everything is going to be shut. They're not doing it. They're doing it by looking at different effects. They're looking at calculating. They have developed certain models to see the impacts of lockdown, to see the impacts of positive impacts of lockdown for COVID. And they're calculating through their model, through their different algorithms. So utilitarianism is the theory that helps us understand these situations. So utilitarianism can give you a set of for instance, utilitarianism gives you a set of rules of thumb. For instance, you can talk about overlap in terms of number. So the number means how many people are going to be affected, how many people are going to be dead by the end of this year, how many people are going to be cured if we give ventilators, so on and so forth. So that's the number factor. There could be also a factor called time factor. So a good decision will also have to be dependent. It has to be dependent on number. How long a benefit will be enjoyed? That is going to be an issue. The quality of life. What kind of quality of life are we going to give if we go for a lockdown? Whether the quality of life is going to go down, or how, if it does go down, how much can we allow that to happen? So that has to be taken care of, right? So utilitarianism has this mechanism within its fold to take care of these concerns. Now, taking these rules of thumbs into account, one can easily come up with a good utilitarian algorithm, an algorithm that will tell you what is the best decision in a given situation, a situation which has to be defined by certain issues like death of the elderly people due to psychological trauma, the effects that are going to be borne by young generation, by school-going kids, and then other ailments who do not get treated during COVID-19 crisis, situations that have to be taken care of. Lots of people are dying due to lack of proper care, and we must pay attention to them as well, right? We must not go down the same route that the whole world is going. Of course, every society has its own sets of problems, and we must be able to take care of that. So a good algorithm will be able to give you proper guidance about policy, about ventilator to your utilitarianism is, while talking about pleasure, but while talking about utility, it's basically talking about coming, lots of Trump support coming in the streets, shouting slogans against lockdown. Now, can you really do in a situation like this? So, of course, the liberty, your rights, your freedoms have a value. They have unique value in our moral domain. But in a situation like this, how much value are you going to give to your individual freedom, right, in lockdown situation, right? That has to be appropriately understood, right? So I'm giving you this example. They have gone for a perfect utilitarian model. Sort of talked about, they have used, suppose, this is something very interesting. One must be aware of this. One must be aware of why this whole, argument to discourse. Now, these countries have used different apps, different mobile apps for tracing, contact tracing. So they can easily locate whether or not person P or person P is getting affected. So through mobile apps, they can sort of trace down, they can curb, and they have been quite effective. They have been able to sort of contain the disease using these mobile apps. Now, the thing is that when you go for this sort of mobile apps, you should also, as a utilitarian policy maker, you should also be able to see its effectiveness in countries like Taiwan, in countries like in Japan or Korea. That might be quite helpful, because everybody has a decent income level and everybody has a smart mobile phone, right? So it may be, and people know how to use it adequately, how to use it and when to use it, that particular app. But in a country that may not be that effective. That's exactly what has happened in India. In the first 2 months, we have heard a lot about Arogya Setu. The government, told us to everywhere, Arogya Setu, Arogya Setu, Arogya Setu, everywhere. But what now? Are we really talking about Arogya Setu anymore? Was it really effective, or just a sort of policy decision? A policy decision made without properly being attentive to the realities of our society. That is not the case in those countries. That is not the case in Japan. That is not the case in India. But why this whole issue has become a huge failure in a country like us? Because there was no proper calculation. There were no suggestions to those makers how effective, how it's going to be. Is it going rather than help? That was not appropriately studied, and that we saw a lot of people, laborers, raise this issue. I don't have money for food. How can I buy a smart mobile phone? Right? How can I download? I do not know how to. I can barely make a call to my 1,000 rupees mobile phone. Download, have Arogya Setu. So that would be the case. If you are perfect utilitarian, you are not to go for that sort of standardized suggestions. You are going to analyze how things are and how things work at ground. But whether or not that has happened, that should be debated and discussed, and not to make any comment on that. As a utilitarian thinker, my suggestion is to tell this is how one must go about it. Right? So here, but it's not. Rights and liberties are not important. Even in lockdown situation, I do need to protect my liberty. I do need to, even that's the question that is being discussed across the world, particularly in Australia, in New Zealand, in other developments. This point is debated. The point is the liberty. If I choose not to go for this particular, every country has apps like Arogya Setu. In Australia, everywhere this has been, but in most countries it has not. In Western countries, it has not been made compulsory. It was voluntary. If you want to have that app, you can have the app. If you do not, then you need to sort of use it in a compulsory way. So the suggestion here is you can choose not to be that app, right? Because there is a threat. If you think that my privacy is going to be infringed upon by this lab, and I am well within my rights to use that app, right? So what are the privacy threats? Lots of companies, lots of big corporate houses are going to be benefited. That's the apprehension that people have. Lots of companies are going to be benefited from these sort of applications because get to know the market, right? If you have these through different ways and means, they will be able to make a assessment about it, and their possible wire that depends on what things that you use in your mobile. And through that, they will be able to, as a company, will be able to evaluate whether or not this person is going to be possible or future for the product that I am developing at this moment. So lots of threat perspectives out. So this has to be taken care of while going for a policy decision. So one's individual freedom has to be properly understood. Suppose mask is again, mask cannot be an individual freedom, because this here, utilitarianism, because utilitarianism has certain checks and balances. For instance, John Stuart Mill talked about harm principle. Harm principle can be very effective, right? So how the harm principle can come to an effect here? So here's what I have to say. So suppose just a second. I just wanted to give you definition of harm principle that Mill is talking about, because this is something that must be kept in mind while talking about different merits. So it's a principle that whole actions of individuals should be only limited to prevent harm to other individuals. So according to this, the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his or her will is to prevent harm to others. Justify making it compulsory for everybody to wear masks, because the question of risk is not just limited to your health, because if you have COVID, so others are going to be harmed by not wearing a mask. So that's why utilitarianism has a proper check and balance. If individual right is to be protected, but that right is to be assessed within certain limits. So you have a right to talk about your individual freedom, have also an obligation or responsibility to see whether or not you are not going to spread virus. So it be addressed. Now, what is happening in certain developed or developing countries is that this utilitarian policy, the whole theoretical paradigm, loosely these paradigms are set on utilitarian ground, but people are not adequately informed about what utilitarianism as a theory suggests. So that's why lots of loopholes, lots of lacunas, lots of failures at the government level, at state level, at policy making level we often see. And the mobile is one such thing. It's not just in India, across different countries. The knee-jerk response is not going to be the benefit. So we have to bring whole theory in. You can't just take one side of it, right? So an effective utilitarian approach may come to your rescue. I mean, the states fully use it at the policy making level. The state may well be within their rights to use forces, police forces, for violating supposed lockdown if they allow certain utilitarian insights appropriately. Yesterday in Guwahati, a differently able child was beaten by police personnel. Right? That must be stopped. In the name of lockdown, you cannot use force brutally, right? That's not going to give you the maximum benefit that you are talking about. If you want to achieve maximum benefit, if you want to help your community or people, then you must cease being harm. So if you do not have the entire package of Islam, you are not going to get help. Rather, you give harm to people. You are going to put people in trouble, and this is something that is not desirable in a utilitarian model. I'm not saying that this is happening only in this country. This is happening at the policy making level in most countries. In most countries, it's happening because this is probably the first time we have experienced a crisis situation like this. But a good policy maker would always make sure this does not happen. When a decision is taken, all the parameters are into account and their plausible effects are appropriately measured, right, appropriately put in a good algorithm to see the benefits over the harms, and that's how you are going to give society and a healthy society to your people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
I hope the participants have a good understanding of the utilitarian conception, how a utilitarian model can help us in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic situation, and how the proper understanding of the utilitarian model can help us to deal with the health issues during the present COVID-19 situation. Dr. Bhaskar, sir, you have some question from the participants we have received in our box, but we'll take it total access of Dr. Pius, sir. Thank you once again for giving your valuable lecture. Thank you once again. Now I request Dr. Pius, sir. Pius, sir, are you audible?
Okay, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
you hear
sir.
me? Okay,
Yes, sir.
fine.
Before that, I request Dr. Papuri Borua to introduce Pius. Over to you, Dr. Borua.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Carry on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes. Good afternoon, all. I feel very introduce Dr. P. Thomas. Yes, Dr. Pius B. Thomas. Dr. Pius B. Thomas is the HOD of the Department of Philosophy, Assam University, Silchar. His areas of specialization are contemporary Western philosophy, politics, ethics, allied ethics, religion, and human rights, philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. His career are focused on the question of the possibility of contextualizing human rights, along with cultural critiques, speculates themes of philosophical concept of interculturality and critique, ethics and reason, democracy and religion, environmental ethics, and the philosophy of action. He has done master in philosophy from Department of Mahatma University, Kerala. Doctoral study was done from Department of Philosophy, University of Madras, and postdoctoral study was done from the Department of Humanities and Social Science from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. So he has published more than 20 papers and books. So may I request Dr. Pius B. Thomas, sir, deliver his lecture. Sir, please.
Happy to be with you in this webinar. Let me start formally. I'm also extremely happy to be with Dr. Bhaskar, my former colleague and my good friend. I was very happy to hear Dr. Bhaskar. I would say that first, because what I'm going to present is slightly different from what he has. But his presentation, grounded in utilitarianism, that was very interesting for me. Of course, I'm on that area, but slightly different point of view. So let me start. Respected Chair, Professor Mavo, respected Chair of the session, and I think Professor Mavo is not there, it's already gone. And Professor Deepak Kumar Sharma, Vice Chancellor, and Dr. Bhaskar JNU, and Dr. Vikas Sharma, head of the department, and his team. Of course, I cherish the warm memories of being with them last February, just before lockdown. When I was there today for an ICPR lecture, I remember the university and, of course, the warm company of Dr. Papuri and Dr. Aparna. So let me start my presentation. I'm extremely happy with you. I'm telling you, the title of my presentation is COVID-19 Pandemic Ethics. COVID-19 pandemic has generated deeper philosophical questions, as we have heard from all my respected or distinguished speakers before me. More standing questions than the practical issues the pandemic has created. Philosophical questions created by are epochal in nature, because we are already in an epoch of the pandemic. Pandemic has created multidimensional philosophical questions and perspectives. They are ethical, political, existential, theoretic questions related with rationality, phenomenological, so on and so forth. Ethical pandemic, in simple terms, is the ethical concerns or the normative questions come out as we facing and along with pandemic. So, as politically, socially, and culturally, societies have to be aware of and encounter issues which are ethical and problems in connection with pandemic. What I would like to share with you is some kind of genealogy of our lived experience in dealing with the and an ethics of vulnerability and an ethics of vulnerability it poses before us. So I think that let us start with the layer to pandemic. We know that Corona-19 pandemic has been on us a game changer. Why it is a game changer? It has been more powerful in inviting the civilizational change at a global level compared with instruments like global ideas, ideologies such as modernity, science, technology, globalization, free markets, and so on. It has reversed or in the process of reversing many institutional frameworks which were thought to be impossible to change. Many have pointed out this. They include modern globalized its culture, production, and profit, which were creating a huge unbridgeable gap between anthropos and nature, and thus inducing man-made ecological and environmental crisis. I will sum it briefly. The impact of the pandemic. The pandemic can affect issues like weakening of democracy. The heart of democracy is liberty, rights, equality, community, freedom. In the name of Corona emergency, all these are violated, suspended. The process is going on. Corona raises from inside the basic democracy, that is equality. The pandemic affects security, social security. We are seeing it in the future more. The system of education and higher education and its basic principle of public social gathering in universities, colleges, schools, etc., which is also the core principle of civil society, which are being affected in a very bad way by the pandemic. Along with the above issues that I've drawn attention to, and as Nobel Rubini, one of the very interesting writers who commented on the problem in a very elaborate manner, informs us, the pandemic will eventually take us to problems like spineless populism, excessive nationalism, xenophobia, deglobalization, economic weakness and insecurity, mass unemployment, rising inequality, debts and defaults or gross fiscal deficits, currency stagnation, and digital destruction of the economy. Very bleak future. COVID-19 pandemic has put us in conceptual contradictions. That's what I'm saying. Global level for good and quite decisively. Now, what are the ethical or moral issues that we face as we enter into the epoch of pandemic? is the second layer of the ethical questions, according to me. Ethics, Dr. Bhaskar has already mentioned, and Dr. Mao also already mentioned, will address the problems like treatment priorities in facility available to the people, the question of money, privilege in this connection, research ethics in search for medicine, vaccine, medical technology, regional and global politics, and various conspiracy theories related with the outbreak of pandemic from the point of view of virology, epidemiology, and of course, virological and biological warfare. There are so many conspiracy theories. We do not every some new one coming. Equally, bioethical concern is the cruel disparity between the governmental statistical claims and related discourses and mundanely called reality when it comes to corona COVID pandemic. Corona-related information is perhaps moving on to create corona justification regimes world over, including the politics of infomania or info authoritarianism. When it comes to create infos against no information in the case of health, diseases, and death. This is becoming true even in the case of relatively open societies. During Kerala, telling Kerala is open society, but relatively some openness is there. So I am telling that it is being closed. It is becoming a closed thing. We may have to travel a lot to reach a proper ground of info beyond authoritarianism, infophobia, and infomania. Ethics, what I see the most complex issues like corona, corona panic, corona racism, or COVID racism, or corona autism, which has started showing their uglies and presence. Why from beginning of the pandemic? The above and byproducts of self-isolation, we are facing it. This is our life. Quarantine, self-quarantine, reverse quarantine, institutional quarantine, forced quarantine, and to no quarantine. We have come to that level now. In the following layer, three of the questions generated by pandemic are ethical questions of self-other relationship. In the layer 2, break up into kind of contradiction or condition, wherein the self becomes lost or encountering itself. Because in the second layer mentioned, the relationship from an ethical point of view is I invite your attention to what Agamben says about pandemic. Michel Foucault. Foucault's idea of biopolitical securitization and the concept of permanent states of exception show us the current developments in the direction of a new order of governance. Gerard Delandy, a very interesting paper. I mentioned the paper of like that very interesting paper by Gerard Delandy describes how, according to Agamben, political opposition that new governance creates from its biopolitical disciplinary inner logic. In addition to surveillance administered by the state, there is also societal implications of all these self-related crisis becomes self-other related, huge governance-related oppressive engagements. In other contribution, Agamben refers to presidency as a pointing to a new kind of social order. I quote, the current health emergency can be considered new political and social devices create humanity. I hope you understand. Unquote. In sum, Agamben draws attention to a range that the current crisis raises for democracy. So I think this with our ethics related with that is democracy, coexistence, and living together. Many of these go back to Foucault's notion of the self as constructed in relations of power, such as those that are now in new technologies of subjectification, subjugation, namely social distancing, face masks, and self-isolation. For Agamben, exception as a long paradigm for government leads to the militarization of the polity an indefinite extension of the state of exception. In a state of exception, the government, or the biological understanding, or the biopolitical understanding of the government, the governments will tell whether you are alive, whether you are dead, whether you are a citizen, you can be included or excluded. That is being continued. It also creates a generalized condition of fear and anxiety among individuals that translates to an authentic need for situations of collective panic, for which the epidemic provides, once again, the ideal pretext. Therefore, in a perverse vicious circle, the limitations of freedom imposed by governments are accepted in the name of that was created by the same governments that are now intervening to satisfy it. Vicious circle. The state of exception is becoming the new normal art of governance. A new kind of securitization, biosecurity, emerges. As Agamben says in a clarification of his original intention, like a society that lives in a permanent state of emergency cannot be a free one. We effectively live in a society that has sacrificed freedom to social security reasons, and as a consequence has condemned its living in a state of fear and insecurity. The naked life, unquote, the naked life and fear of losing it is not something that brings men and women together, but something that blinds and separates them. The structural principle of separation operating. Governments are now employing digital programs, data tracking, application to record personal contacts. Dr. Bhaskar mentioned about Arogya Setu and all that. CCTV networks equipped with facial recognition. The UK government to use back-end access to Bluetooth connections to enable contact tracing. These new technologies are creating lucrative new markets for the extraction, sale, and analysis of private data. So in the name of governance, something else is happening. A lucrative economy and total reduction of citizens into zero. The major question that I would like to ask in this juncture is that, is there a genealogy of pandemics in connection with the genealogy of the ethical concerns related ethical questions? If we look at them historically, this is my kind of an intervention. Some of the recent studies tell us that the major 20 pandemics, people do not agree with this, there may be more or there may be less. In the human history, have created major groups of humanity, the marginalized victims, the blameworthy, made vulnerable due to some kind of biopolitics, slaves, the downtrodden, peasants, the outcasts, the migrants, refugees, sexual minorities, racial minorities, religious minorities, and so on. Of course, these prehistorical kind of pandemic, say starting with and Antononian and Athenian, and ending with Zika virus, H1N1, and the present pandemic. All these are creating some victim group, some marginalized group, some people, those who are unwanted. The pattern of apathy, dehumanization. This is the pattern. This is the moment of ethical recognition of what is happening there. Apathy, dehumanization, and victimization, or the otherization. In all these, what we see, genealogy of the pandemics, what we see is the otherization, dehumanization. We and they dominantly operate. Similarly, if you look at the history of the dynamics of Holocaust, I think there is a structural, functional relationship between pandemics and Holocausts as racial, religious, or civilizational attempts at destroying the political others, enemies. We see the same logic of apathy, dehumanization, and victimization of the otherization, deization. All these are words by me. Deization dominantly operate there as well. Ideological holocausts as well as known genocides, mass killings are very much part of it. Racial discrimination in the apartheid, color discrimination, caste system, casteism, colonize to try its logic of physical, material holocaust, cultural holocaust, not necessarily material holocaust. Mentioning Holocaust will take us immediately to Nazism and camps. Concentration camps. You may be remembering or you may be knowing what is a concentration camp. As a great thinker of our time, Adorno has said, there is no poetry after, or no creative niceties after Auschwitz, because humanity acted like a monster. Absolute lack of concern for life, and others. Perhaps captured and condensed humanity's logic of victimization and terrorization. I was talking about the concentration camp. It would be interesting to think that during the present pandemic, the world becomes a huge concentration camp. As the survivors of the concentration camps have shared with the world later. There are so many examples, and the examples remember quickly. Martin Buber, Emmanuel Levinas, and Viktor Frankl, et al. We cannot think of racial discrimination and casteism, wherein racial purity and the ideals of untouchability manifest as functional elitism. The current pandemic, purity and untouchability gain structural prominence related with survival. Of course, this is there. The structure of what we see ethically unwanted, ethically what we can criticize was there as dominant functional structures in the world. If we look at the genealogy of pandemics and Holocaust, that's what I'm trying to tell you. A professor of English, his wife was infected. He had come for a seminar on 19 pandemic, and he was telling personally also on phone the kind of problem victimization faced. His wife was a high-level official working in Lieutenant Governor. She got the disease from there, and after that, the whole family, his daughter, he and his wife, they've become outcasts. The irrational distanciation is very poor. So the mix and the history of the Holocaust, I believe, tells us that the lack of plurality is in the global structure of generating the vulnerable, whether it is due to ideological power play or the biopolitics of governance and the state of action, as Agamben tells us. So I feel what there is a little more theoretically ethics of plurality and what is ethics of vulnerability for the student's sake. Knowing all this, I find ethics of plurality. We have moral standards. We are living in a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic world. So we have so many moral standards which talk about what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And conventionally we say that ethics will go there and create a platform, rational platform. But I would say that reality is not the metaphysical purity, but the principle of dialogue. Because all these moral standards are equal and thriving and throbbing for their expression. So they have to be brought in to some kind of a dialogical platform. That is what is ethics. And ethics. So next is ethics of vulnerability. We should think about the ethics of, the politics of vulnerability, another very interesting area of debate. It triggers off from two insights, according to one, as Habermas has reminded awareness that when some system is at the helm of affairs with decisive most cherished benefit of all consequence of their decisions, policies, actions, etc. The second is we get from the tradition of existential phenomenology of Levinas and its later extension into post-structural and deconstruction, which asserts that ethics is possible only when there is other and otherness to be encountered by the self. As Hannah Arendt has said, well-known thinker, there is no supreme self because there is no self alone in the world, there are others. So if you want to think about ethics, of course you have to think about others. they come together. Maybe they are Levina. Now, coming back to our prime question today, navigating and negotiating through briefly the connectives that we work out, such as the genealogy of pandemics, as Holocaust, and genocides of otherization, which manifest fully in the structural principle of sustainability and coexistence. I feel that I should propose a model of ethics of plurality and the ethics of vulnerability as a critical ethical paradigm from the philosophical debate of the great thinkers of our time. I call the model human dignity, social justice, freedom, democracy, and known knowledge. Model of the ethics and the ethics of vulnerability. As we have discussed, I am convincingly driven by the Foucault-Agamben diagnosis of the principles of coexistence in the epoch of pandemic as one of the major theoretic tools. However, I add to it the Kantian Habermasian idea of human dignity that can still inspire democratic potential of solidarity. The Immanuel Kant Habermas concept talks about the centrality of human dignity instead of the elusive good or irresponsible utilitarianism or self-defeating liberal notion of negative liberty. I hope Dr. Bhaskar forgave me. There was a debate on, and in the whole debate, wherein Agamben or Habermas or this critical tradition come in, they were all saying, from the point of view of the European experience, this utilitarian kind of an ethical background is totally irresponsible to the ideas, spinelessly, and telling that let people die, let useless people die. And so they were that it is a useless theory, and it is scary also. That's what they're telling. Of course, it's debatable. I leave it to Professor Bhaskar. Maximum number of self-defeating liberal notion of negative liberty. And this school, particularly, they reject communitarianism, pluralism, they reject utilitarianism. Of course, as debating partners, but of course, wanting of theoretical understanding when it comes to human life. As Jürgen Habermas has pointed out recently, the Kant principle that the effects of the state to save every single human life must have absolute priority over utilitarian offsetting of the undesirable economic costs. This is a quotation from Habermas. On this view, the dignity of the individual person is the overriding normative force in determining concrete policies, even if in this case it is very unclear what these might be. Habermas, referring to the pandemic, says, quote, "We must act," perhaps one of the very interesting statements I heard, though Habermas, I don't expect any, but participating in a debate, he made a very interesting, he was telling we must act explicit knowledge of our known knowledge. In all these theories, biopolitical understanding, biopolitical subjectification or subjectivization or subjugation, what is there is a claimed knowledge, many things. But we should go forward with the non-knowledge, which has only one knowledge, the knowledge of human life, the dignity of human life. As Christopher Britton elucidates it, governments and medical authorities, along with the rest of us, must make decisions without a full understanding of the nature and limits of the differences. In such a situation, the way forward is to a hope that shuns both optimism and pessimism. To do otherwise is to allow the pandemic to shape not only our day-to-day lives, but even the way we imagine the nature of existence itself. This concept of dignity, I think, is to be integrated with, and the concept of dignity that I was presenting from the point of view of Kant and Habermas, I don't think it is complete. Go forward in understanding the ethics of vulnerability. They should be integrated with and chastised by and theoretic tools which could be butted with it, added with. We can here add things like Santiago Zabala, reminds us this pandemic requires global collaboration, responsibility, solidarity, no place for indifference in the searching for disruptive innovations is a sign of indifference rather than solidarity. And it was Zizek here, who tells us that as he criticizes the barbarically dispensing capitalism, we have to raise the key question. I quote him: "What is wrong that we were caught by catastrophe, despite scientists were warning us about it for years from environmental, global warming perspective?" And reinvent and create the bond of people. His recent publication on pandemic came into the world. And the other thing that I would like to add to this framework is Alain Badiou joins the fold as he writes, quote, "Nonetheless, self-isolation on the future. As for desire real change in the political advantage of this pandemic I'm talking about, I quote him: "The first lesson the coronavirus has taught us is also the most astounding. We have actually proven that it is possible in a few weeks to put an economic system on hold everywhere in the world." As Delandy has put it, Bruno Latour suggests that the health crisis may be an early sign of a new age of anthropocentric or Anthropocene politics, not anthropocentric, Anthropocene politics. The current biological securitization that we are witnessing is a dress rehearsal for climate change. It cannot be a coincidence that the health crisis is occurring at the same time as an ecological crisis has taken on a new urgency. Unquote. I would like to conclude here, reaffirming the combination of human dignity, social justice, freedom, democracy, and known knowledge as the ethics of hope, as the ethics of plurality, and the ethics of the vulnerable and of praxis in the time of pandemic. I think I can say thank you now, and I thank again the organizers, the brilliant team, of course the speakers before me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for giving your valuable lecture. I hope the participants got an understanding about the various ethical norms and principles and how this principle can help to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Sir has also talking about ethical morality, ethical vulnerability, etc. Sir, thank you once again for giving us this few times from your busy schedule. So we are extremely sorry, sir, to say that sir has left her due to some other engagement, unavoidable engagement, which the vulnerable VCs are.
For Mr. Prakash, sir. Sir, are you audible? Are you here?
Yes, I can hear.
Sir, would you like to take one by one, or?
Sure. I mean, I can see the questions. I can see the questions in the chat box. So I'll just quickly browse through them and then we'll give a cogent reply if I can. So in today's era, people are going to be more materialistic rather than spiritualistic. So how can we generate more ethical work? Well, so I must tell you, I'm not a very, but I think so. Spiritual need not go together, right? So you don't necessarily need to be spiritual in this country, but it's not the case the rest of the world, I suppose. So spiritualism needs to be in different terms and language. Language of morals, ethical without being spiritual. And that's something that we have seen because there are lots of spiritual gurus and sort of teachers who are not very ethical in their behavior. Ethics and socialism on that, and they must not be combined. Of course, there can be an effort of sort of seeing sort of ethical development, and that's possible. And I've done this. Gandhi did it. Vivekananda tried to do it. Gore also talked about that's possible. Is very much there, but it's the relationship is not of necessity, but of contingency. And there are different models and sort of approaches of understanding. So utilitarianism, if I have to, by the way, I am utilitarian, wrong, but I'm invoking, I'm talking about utilitarianism and trying to understand its times. So spiritualism, by the way, has no place in utilitarian philosophy. Is actually very, very rational. It goes by calculation, it goes by number, it goes by unit, it goes by the models that we call in modern time. So there's no place of spiritualism in utilitarianism. Okay, I think I have responded to the question. There's somebody called Nabanita Rai who is asking, can you suggest some alternative use in your which would be beneficial to remark? Well, that I'm just saying yes, nor saying no, that before going for any sort of, one must appropriately and adequately analyze impacts of it, possible impacts of that particular policy. So one should be able to justify it only on the basis of the outcome that one gets from a particular policy. So utilitarianism problem about it can't be when they are. So that's the position. So if you have the application, if you have a good sort of mobile itself, see whether we should have mobile or not. There, when we were even our parents used to watch movies, don't watch television, this is bad. That time it was a kind of a taboo. But we know that's no longer the case, right? Now some parents might say, well, don't use mobile phone, using mobile phone not good. That's again one heavy of how it is helping us, right? Of course, vis-a-vis how it is harming us. So the calculation has to be done accordingly. I'm not saying that's ultimate solution. I'm not saying that utilitarianism is only solution. I'm just saying that in a crisis situation, in emergency situations like 19, utilitarianism can be very handy. Very simple problem. I'm not saying that that's the only solution. Again, I'm repeating, it's not only solution and it most effective solution. It's one of the approaches, and it can be very handy. Have a better option, go for it. Other alternative theory that gives maximum benefit to makers, to government panels, organizations, institutions. That's the small and simple limited point I'm making about utilitarianism. So I think to suggest whether there is or is not an alternative to Arugasitu. I am not saying anything about Arugasitu. I'm just saying the effectiveness of this app. Now it's out there for you to see or not. If it is problem with it, if it is my understanding it has not been beneficial, then it is not a good policy, right? Okay, so then Paramita Chaudhary is asking about If lockdown may not result in a quality life for maximum number of people, then can be the alternative. What can be the alternative? No, I'm not saying no to lockdown. Lockdown is probably one of the most important things that we need to talk about. And India did pretty well by going for lockdown right in the beginning. And that way, India was quite able to sort of contain the disease to for quite some time. That's why we have death rates are still very low compared to many European countries. So that was a good policy. If I have to make an assessment whether or not going for lockdown right in the beginning was a good decision, I would say that was a good decision. That is a good decision, then that must be uploaded. But the manner in which it is this was practiced, the manner in which it was operationalized in certain rural areas, that must be analyzed, and we must ask questions. As I said, just last night, I think I just saw this morning, I think in Guwahati, a differently able child was beaten up by police in the name of lockdown. But is that something that can be accepted? I think today the police chief is also giving a clarification that he's going to catch hold of those people, those police officers who did that. So this is what we need. In the name of law, you cannot sort of criminalize people's everyday life affairs. So that has to be properly checked. Nobody is saying that if you have lockdown, we are going to beat you up if you are going just for So that's not the norm. That's not acceptable. So the policymakers don't suggest that. The government is not saying that you should go and beat up people like that. It's the problem with the police enforcement. The problem in which police, some educated, unaware police, personnel doing it. So that has to be contained, and the responsibility goes to the chief of these police forces. Right? They need to imagine the life of that differently able child. While he was going to buy medicine with his father. He was probably just less than 15 years old. What harm did he cause to people of Guwahati? Nothing, right? So this has to be appropriately advised, and our police forces and everybody to be sensitized about this. And this is where we have to have a balance. Utilitarianism doesn't suggest that. Utilitarianism says that you have to see the benefit. Utilitarianism, what kind of benefit? It's not saying that only the material benefit. It's talking about all kinds of benefits that matter to us, to human life, to our human life. So utilitarianism is not a very narrow. There are lots of misunderstanding about this theory in recent past, but it has been rejuvenated in a very, very fresh sort of form in last 20 years. P.J. Singer was one of them, and there are many others like in recent times who have done this. So if you are if you look at the latest literature, you'll find a very refined theory. You'll find a very, very helpful and very insightful theory. It's not what Mill and Bantham suggested in the late 19th century or early part of 20th century. It's quite different from what it was. It's now very, very well advanced theory, and it's being used. Remember Amartya Sen, he's a champion on utilitarianism. The reason that he was given Nobel laureate is also because of his contribution to utilitarianism. So you please check the literature contributed by Amartya Sen on utilitarianism. Also see how capability approach has the basis of an utilitarian approach by Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, and how this has been used in many countries, in many developed or developing countries nowadays. So utilitarianism is not a bad thing, and that's something that we must keep in mind all the time. Okay, so that was the question. that has been answered. I'm not saying that there's any I'm not saying no to lockdown. I'm saying that be sensitive when you go measure the pros and cons of it. Think the last person, the poorest of the society. Think about the person who is differently able. He should not suffer because of that. Of course, there will be some inconvenience to people. So we are harmed, that is not acceptable. So that must be taken into consideration. So I think that will take time. And over to you, Papuri, probably also. And thanks. I must just say a big thank you to Dr. Pius, my erstwhile very dear colleague. So I really enjoyed it. Dr. Pius, you can hear. I mean, I think I'm living my life in states of acceptance situation. So I'm very much in some acceptance.
Yeah. I'm getting regular reports of that condition, it seems.
Oh yeah, that's
so you're on JNU campus or?
Yes, I live on the campus and there are some 25-30 cases in the JNU campus. So somehow, so far we're safe.
My friends in Delhi were telling 70% of people in Delhi are all infected.
Yeah, the state of exception.
Yeah, this 150, 200 cases.
Oh God. Yeah. So So I really enjoyed your on states of state of exceptions. So I'm saying state of exception not just in terms of, but also other kinds of harms and malice that we. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seeing you for a long time. Nice to see you.
Yeah, please come and visit us.
Oh, after the COVID.
Oh yeah, you must come. You must be grown up now.
Yes. I would like to invite the golden couple for a seminar. I'll invite you.
Sure. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhagazit Neuk sir, for delighting about ethics in this pandemic situation. And thanks the participants, all the participants, for your active participation. Is our the question and answer discover. Now I request our session.
Thank you, Dr. Papuri. Now we come. The chairperson has left.
So we have to adopt this alternative practice, that is online classes. But survey shows that through TV channel and my experience in doing online classes, 80% are enjoying online facilities and 60% students are depriving. So as a student of philosophy, I want to know from you what your listen about those depriving students, case study.
Yes, very much.
Please, I want to know from you.
Yes. No, relevation, and this is something as a teacher I am also sort of facing on a everyday. This is definitely not a solution. This is not a solution to any standard model of education. Online is not going to solve any problem, online education. And this is such a discriminatory. If you look at it, its implementation, the manner in which it is being suggested to us, it's fundamentally discriminatory nature in a country like us. I have heard there's a 15-year-old suicide in Assam because he didn't have a mobile phone.
Yes.
I have a friend who kept on asking me to buy a mobile phone for her daughter, who is just HSLC examination. Now, because they're very good and they will have to be in competition with their colleagues, with their peer groups. Now they are in deep trouble. How are they going to get the education if we make it mandatory for them to be online? it's very fundamentally, it is discriminatory in nature. It can go on up to an extent, but it can never be an alternative. Different models of utilitarian philosophy have suggested that this can be the case.
And sir, this is a vast gap, no? 40% and 50%.
No, it's a huge, and so we have data. We have data to prove. So in my class, I have an MPhil course where I teach 6 students, and one of them is from a remote village in Haryana. So out of 6 students, only two students were not able to attend the class when I initially said that I was going to go for class. Then the class itself, they take a decision, common decision, a collective decision not to come to the class, affected by this discriminatory policy.
Yes.
So even because I am privileged, I have a laptop, but my friend who doesn't have this, I cannot allow him to be affected by this. So lots of
Once he completes, I would like to say one word.
So AI is not an alternative to any model, so it cannot go on. I mean, there's no harm waiting. It can be you cannot force people to buy these mechanisms. Buy this. If how are you going to help that person? How are you going to force that person to use it? If no internet connection in Assam, in rural areas, you to charge your mobile phones. How are you going to take a class on mobile phones? This is absolutely bizarre. So one has to think more perspicuously. The government of the day has to together see their problems and then amicably come up with a solution. It can't be for everything. It's not going to work. One centralized solution is not a solution to it.
I would like to add a word to Dr. Bhaskar said. I fully agree with what Dr. Bhaskar said. And the questioner is raising a very important point. Infrastructure-wise, I know. If you take online classes, only 50% of the student or sometimes even less can listen. I'm also facing the Assam reality. And forget about Assam. Take the whole of India. Only 5% of the students have state-of-the-art equipments and machinery facility for attending online classes. And this is a big imagination that we can have online classes, we can have online exams, and it's miserable is to be challenged. And infrastructure-wise, it is impractical, no doubt about it. I fully support what Dr. Bhaskar said. Yeah. And secondly, as I mentioned in my presentation, this is a miserable violation of democracy also. We are in a democracy. And the university structure, as many people, he mentioned about, Amartya Sen and Nasboam, and of course, in connection with the paper of Tagore and Foucault, Derrida, I mentioned this. I made a presentation. I was telling, university is basically the source of public sphere. We make public sphere experience. We create civil society there. And we should come together. And of course, this is a very important principle of democracy. More than that, teachers, we need to see face to face. This mechanical seeing face to face is very much, we take energy in teachers. And this energy is transacted with the students. And this is a kind of encounter, this face-to-face communication, nothing like that. And many people, technological, technocratic gutization of the idea of communication is a very poor alternative to what we have or education, higher education. I thought I'd add this to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. No, one more interesting thing is the corporate interest involved in that. In technology and all that, a lot of corporates, they're going to sell up, go up. That's going to happen, and forced by this. And that is why, the example that one student say that I'm doing harm by not attending the class. I cannot allow my friend to suffer from my participation. When I join, my joining is going to indirectly harm him by not giving him enough. So that is something fundamentally discriminatory in nature. That must be taken down by government. So that's something that, yeah.
And
Thank you, Bhaskar sir. Thank you, Dr. Payas, for giving. Sorry, madam. Sorry. Hello.
About one
Yes.
question to give me chance to clear these queries. Will you give me chance to ask?
Yeah. You ask,
Madam.
no, you
Already,
ask
time is
here.
okay, madam. Just sort out the question.
Thomas sir, I heard from you that the masters of Mahatma Gandhi. That's why I want to ask one question. See, now national animal is invisible disease, that is COVID-19. Okay, sir, right? And COVID-19 is attacked us economically, socially, physically, mentally, and release as even in education. I cannot explain you briefly, but see, these are the important factors of human life live in the world. So, do you think that Gandhian principle, that 12 vows, which we know that 12 vows, that is ahimsa, truth, non-violence, equality of religion, physical labor, Swadeshi, 12 vows, he himself strictly follows in this principle. But the thing, this 12 vows is very much relevant in present situation. If we follow this principle in our country, then we can overcome this problem. What's your view, sir? Come on.
Sure. Gandhi fits well into the system or our debate, what we are discussing about. Gandhi, with some correction, is working very well with this ethical patterns that we are talking about. Gandhi has a very strong response to this. Of course, as you know, this virus, if we can think that it is something created by nature, it is within us already. Viruses were always with us. We're part of it. Only thing is we have to learn how to live with them. The problem starts, of course, as many studies have pointed out, when we attack nature, we destroy nature, we try to overcome nature with our greed. So this coming of COVID-19 pandemic and the virus is very, according to many studies, they're associated with global warming. And how global warming is coming? Global warming is part of our disrespect for nature. We were greedily using nature, and Mahatma Gandhi said it very clearly. We have enough in the nature for our need, not for our greed. So our greed actually created this COVID-19 pandemic. We can see that. And of course, we have to learn how to live with this nature. And of course, Gandhian principle of Satyagraha, Gandhian principle of Ahimsa, all these things are fitting very well into this pattern of understanding how to face ethically the COVID-19 pandemic problems created by that. Of course, see, modern thinkers also take up Gandhi in a very big way. For example, Bruno Latour, a well-known sociologist and a critic of science, of philosophy of science, is mentioning about a critical space. We have a given space in nature. We cannot go beyond that. We cannot use the entire nature. And as recently somebody has pointed out, see, the developed countries, the per capita carbon usage is 27 tons. And the people in the poor country, it is 1.5 tons. And if the world is existing, not going beyond a miserable carbon problem, it is because of the poverty and the poor people and their restrictions. So Gandhi is very meaningful. Gandhi is very, very important. Gandhi is to be brought into this debate very seriously. Of course, I would add happily Gandhi and Tagore into the structure that I brought in, wherein we can have a kind of ethics of plurality and ethics of vulnerability. Gandhi was talking about the ethics of vulnerability only. Gandhi was talking about the ethics of plurality only. Of course, thank you so much for raising that question.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Payas, sir, Dr. Bhaskarjit, sir. Very lively session. I hope the participants have greatly benefited from today's webinar on a very vibrant and sensitive topic. Now I request Dr. Vikas Bhargav sir, head of the department, Kumar Bhaskar Mohan Sanskrit University, to give an overview of today's webinar. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Tapan. Am I audible, Tapan? Am I audible? Thank you once again, respected Vice Chancellor sir, Honorable Registrar sir, Controller of Examination, and
Dr. Vikas, you are not audible.
Yeah, now sir, am I audible?
Now it's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I was a listener, rather I was a learner from this three rich paper. Somehow, because of Professor Mao had another engagement with Vice Chancellor, so he has entrusted the responsibility to share this session informally to me. And I don't think so that I am very much responsible and comfortable for this duty. Anyway, I think that I have got another scope to thank you all, and I have to share my ideas, what I feel even, and the most enlightened papers, and you, three of you, sir, most of you, three of you are my direct teachers, so I cannot make any critical comment on your papers. Pardon me for that. But you have highlighted man and man relations, and particularly to live in a pandemic situation, and you have rightly pointed out the role of different ethical theorems, particularly utilitarianism, and so many important ethical, bioethical issues you have raised, and it also includes animal ethics, environmental ethics, and other ethical issues which also uh, 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 touches its heart to the sociological and ecological dimension. And very well, you have three of you have rightly discussed about the relationship of self and the other, and understanding others in this particular pandemic situation. See, we are in a very dangerous situation and maintaining social distancing, and somehow and somewhere, I think that solidarity, humanity, and democracy, as you have uh, rightly mentioned, sometimes it is grazing down. And in this point, I think the care ethics is coming out, as three of you have rightly mentioned. And I will not lengthen my speech. My respected teachers, the distinguished speakers, you have given your best deliberations for us. I hope the entire platform will be benefited from this one-day webinar. Our intention was to give some basic information and to gear up our students, because the students are not only facing the COVID pandemic situation, but also facing a very hard time with the flood, particularly in Assam. So I will conclude this chairman's comment with this one sentence that rightly Payas sir has mentioned right now, that we have to learn to live. There is no other way. And we have to learn to live, and it is the art, and we have to learn that art by heart. So with this, I will conclude my comments. Thank you once again. Thank you, Tapan, Papuri, and Arpana, for giving me this opportunity to share this session. And my regards to the chairperson who is not present right now, Professor Mao, and the other two speakers, Professor Bhaskar and Professor Payas. In spite of your very a busy schedule of academic excellence. You were here for last 3 hours. Thank you, sir. What, Tapan?
And
Thank
Dr.
you.
Agarwal, I just want to make a small clarification to Dr. Bhaskar because it was a very interesting debate, not debate, exchange between us. I was trying to
Yes,
mention
sir.
the policies of Boris Johnson, British Prime Minister, and President Trump. These two people are looking like a kind of big utilitarians, not human utilitarians. Extremely sorry to make this statement. Sorry. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, so it all depends how you do it. So Boris Johnson must have
That's correct.
misused it, and Trump must have abused it. So,
Yes.
so it depends how you. That's the flexibility that you have in this theory.
Exactly. Correct.
So it depends
That's
how
all I
you
have
put
to
up.
accept.
Thank you, sir. Now we come to the end of the session with a formal vote of thanks. Now I request Ms. Arpana Ramsey, professor of the Department of Philosophy of our university. Over to you, Ms. Arpana Ramsey.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Tapan Talukdar. And can you hear me?
Yes. You can
Yes.
hear you.
I can hear. Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, all. It's my privilege to have us to offer my vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Deepak Kumar Sama sir, for his valuable lecture on the ethical principles and how to deal with these moral values, morality in our daily life. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And now I would like to offer my heartfelt gratitude Registrar Dr. Hemendra Sharma sir for his kind support, encouragement, and for making it happen. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And I must have to thank our examination controller, Dr. Sushanto Kumar Kaisop sir, for his constant support, help, arrangement, for kind of things that we needed for. So thank you so much, sir, for helping us throughout. Now I would like to propose my vote of thanks to our chairperson, Professor Xavier P. Mauser, for his valuable lecture on ethical principles and gracing today's webinar also. And he focuses on how to unscientific beliefs and how to traditional beliefs are creating stigma to human mankind. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us, and we love to collaborate with you again in our near future for any academic event. And I would like to thank to the invited speaker, Dr. Bhaskar Jitnyok sir, for your wonderful lecture for provoking on ethical implication in a very rational way. And he focuses on how government's sudden decision of lockdown affecting our modern life and how we laws are interconnected between the communities and humanities across the world. And thank you so much, sir, for your valuable lecture also and making today's webinar very impactful, lively, and meaningful. And again, sir, we love to collaborate with you in our near future also. So thank you so much for joining us all the way from Delhi, sir. So thank you so much, sir. And I would like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Payas V. Thomas, sir, for your thought-provoking lecture on the ethical questions during pandemic and how corona breaks the democracy or liberty of people across the world, and how the government creates vulnerability to humankind. And yes, we lose our this recognition between the self and other, because our subjectivity is the other dependent subjectivity, and without otherness the self is not be completed. So like because of this pandemic also, like we are traumatized by the death. And I would say, sir, like that mourning also becoming as a political act in this during sir, pandemic. And because this we are created, we human beings are created because of this interlocking power of xenophobia, rationalism, and racism. So thank you so much, sir, for your valuable speech on this ground, sir. So we'll have to collaborate with you also, sir, in your future for any academic work, sir. So thank you so much, sir. And I'd like to thank our beloved head of the department, Dr. Vikas Bhargav Sharma, sir, for his moral support, guidance, and making the webinar happen, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us also. And I would like to thank the coordinators of today's webinar, including Dr. Topan Talukdar, Dr. Papuri Borua, and including myself also, and for making this webinar a grand success also. And I must also thank our technician, Mr. Bonajit Rava, for his help throughout. Without your help, it was not possible to have such a beautiful webinar. So thank you so much, Bonajit Rava, for helping us throughout. And last but not the least, I must have to thank to all the participants, including my dear students, other research scholars, teachers who are joining us from different places of India. So I would like to thank you for your kind support, cooperation, and your active participations. And without your patience and participations, today's webinar would have not been accomplished one. So I thank you all for your kind cooperation. So here I wrap up my segment of vote of thanks, and with my vote of thanks also, I would like to wrap up today's webinar.
Miss Orgona.
Yes, yes, sir.
Miss Orgona,
Yes.
please take the name of IQAC coordinator.
Oh yes, yes. So.
Adrian. She has helped a lot of.
Okay. I'm so sorry for this also, and I would like to thank Dr. Sir, IQAC member, for giving us for showing us the path, the ways to organize such a beautiful webinar. So thank you so much, sir. And I think I have not left out anyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Dr.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So should I wrap up today's webinar formally?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So with my vote of thanks, I would like to end of today's webinar. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you to the entire team.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.